athlete by the name of Franklin Buddy Held set a world javelin record. Set a world javelin record. They don't throw the javelin in Wyoming, do they? It's banned, yeah. They still throw it in Montana.
What?
Javelin.
I spelled javelin.
Javelin. So American athlete Franklin Buddy Held set a world javelin record. He threw it 263 feet 10 inches. 263 feet 10 inches. That was a new record. Now this is probably not even interesting. I probably need to find a new thing because we don't throw the javelin here. I got to find something else. Yeah, if you care, he later threw it 268 feet 2 inches in 1955, and his career best throw was 270 feet in 1956. That was a big throw even in today's standards. So we'll have to find something different because they don't throw the javelin in this state. Okay, on August 14th, this was kind of a surprise, the Soviet Union announced to the world that they had built and successfully tested a hydrogen bomb. Something they would obviously be able to use in warfare. That kind of scared us a little bit. So, on August 14th, 1953, the Soviet Union announced to the world that they had not only built, but successfully tested a hydrogen bomb. That made us just a little bit nervous. Well, you know what occurred on September 12th of 1953? The wedding of the decade. The wedding of the decade. Who did it involve? Senator John F. Kennedy and Jacqueline Bouvier. They were married in Newport, Rhode Island on September 12th, 1953. The wedding of the decade. Big deal in America at the time. Probably the most eligible bachelor in Washington, Senator John F. Kennedy marries Jacqueline Bouvier in Newport, Rhode Island. And that'll start a discussion we'll have for many, many weeks here to come. And on the 30th of September, this was a big thing that we'll end up talking about. President Eisenhower appointed a new Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Matter of fact, it would be the 14th Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Anybody want to guess who that person was? We've talked about him. He was a vice presidential candidate with Thomas Dewey in 1948. No. He was a governor of California, Earl Warren. Now he will be the Supreme Court Justice for many, many years and will be chairing a commission known as the Warren Commission to investigate the assassination of John F. Kennedy in 1963-64. So it was on September 30th of 1953 that President Eisenhower appointed California Governor Earl Warren as the 14th Chief Justice of the United States. Hey, it's baseball season. It's October. We'll tell you what happened on October 5th of 1953. Any Yankee fans in here? New York Yankee fans? Not a one. Well, that's too bad because on October 5th, 1953, the New York Yankees won their 5th consecutive World Series. 5 in a row. Hard to win 1, let alone 5 in a row. The New York Yankees of professional baseball won their 5th consecutive World Series. Are the Yankees in the playoffs now? Anybody know? You don't even know? What kind of a class is this? The Yankees are in the playoffs right now. They're playing the Cleveland Indians. 2 games apiece. The final game is like tomorrow. And the winner goes to the American League Championship Series. Now, the manager of the Yankees was Casey Stengel. And when they won that World Championship on October 5th, 1953, he became the first manager in baseball history to coach 5 World Championship teams. So manager Casey Stengel became the first manager in Major League Baseball history to coach 5 World Championship teams. Hey, you know what happened on October 31st? On Halloween? Guess what was introduced to a few homes in and around New York City? Televisions. Televisions. It was an experiment. It was an experiment. And And they were gonna see how well they worked in New York City, and then they were gonna flood shops by Christmas. That was the idea. Now, what was the difference between this TV and the other TV that they had been experimenting with? This one was color. So, television sets were put in a few homes in and around New York City. These people were treated to experimental color television, and the new color television sets, if they found to be successful, would be flooding shops all over the city by Christmas. October 31st, 1953. November 19th. What happens after the World Series? What do they vote on? After the World Series, the whole season's over. They'll pick an MVP. Well, it just so happened on November 19th, 1953, Major League Baseball player Roy Campanella was voted the National League's most valuable player. Anybody do Campanella on their We Didn't Start the Fire? I don't think we're that far, but he's in there. So Major League Baseball player Roy Campanella was voted the National League's most valuable player. Second time he had been picked as an MVP. And on November 24th, we'll be talking about this specifically pretty quick, on national television, Wisconsin Senator Joseph McCarthy did what? You have him? What did he do?
He was put on trial for disclosing to his,
Well, close. He was, but on November 24th, 1953, he accused the Truman administration of crawling with communists during that presidency. Joseph McCarthy is going to be a guy that's going to go on a communist witch hunt. And he's going to accuse everybody in the country of being communist. And as Siobhan said, he's going to go too far, and he's going to have some problems. But it was on November 24th of 1953 on national television that he stood up and accused the Truman administration of crawling with communists during the time he was president. That was not a good thing to do. All right, here you go. December 16th. December 16th. For the first time in American history, the White House allowed the media to print direct quotes from press conferences. First time ever that the White House allowed a media outlet to print what the President of the United States said in a paper. So for the first time in American history, on December 16, 1953, the White House allowed the media to print direct quotations from press conferences in their newspapers. Now this might surprise you football fans. Any football fans in here? Who's the worst team in professional football?
The Giants.
Well, they're bad. Giants are bad. Who else?
The Browns.
Who's been the worst team in football forever? The Browns. Well, believe it or not, on December 27th, 1953, the Detroit Lions won the NFL championship by beating the Cleveland Browns 17-16. Now those are two franchises that haven't won anything since, pretty much. So, on December 27th, 1953, the Detroit Lions win the NFL championship with a 17-16 win over the Cleveland Browns. How about that? Okay, that's 1953 at a glance. We'll have more excitement, a little more excitement when we get to 57 and 58. Okay, we're going to talk about what Siobhan alluded to, and that's the menace of McCarthyism. The menace of McCarthyism. This was kind of a big deal in the early 1950s. Now, McCarthyism actually started in the latter stages of the Truman administration and continued through the Eisenhower administration. And basically what Joseph McCarthy did, that senator from Wisconsin, is he accused high government officials of either being communist or being sympathetic with communism. he went kind of crazy after communists, because that was a concern in our country. So McCarthyism actually started in the early 1950s, toward the end of the Truman administration, and continued through the Eisenhower administration. And during that time, Joseph McCarthy accused high-level government officials of being sympathetic with communism or being communists themselves. Now, among the first officials that he attacked was during the Truman administration, when he attacked Truman's Secretary of State, Dean Acheson. And Dean Acheson will come back into play for us during the Cuban Missile Crisis. That's a ways down the line. So among the officials attacked by McCarthy were President Truman's Secretary of State, Dean Acheson. There's always a coat holder in this deal. There's always, you know what a coat holder is? A coat holder is who stirs up Elise and gets her all wound up about something, and then holds her coat while she goes and gets in the fight, or she gets herself in trouble. You don't want to be around coat holders. You know who the coat holder was around McCarthy? The guy that was prodding? Mr. Republican. Senator Robert Taft of Ohio was really encouraging this. Because when he first started assaulting government officials, what political party were they? Democrat, and he was a Republican. So McCarthy was strongly encouraged by Republican Senator Robert Taft to assault the Democratic Party. McCarthy got so low in his blows, so to speak, that in 1951 he even attacked General George C. Marshall. This guy was a World War II hero. This guy was considered the patriot of all patriots. And McCarthy even accuses General George C. Marshall of being sympathetic to communists. And then he kind of got away from government officials and he started attacking other influential people like actors and writers and educators. He just kind of went off the wall. And he actually had a lot of support. And by the end of 1953, a national poll reported that more than 50% of Americans supported what he was doing, going after these communist sympathizers. So, I mean, he's going after high-ranking government officials, he's going after high-ranking military officials, he's going after actors and celebrities and educators. And by the end of 1953, he's got over 50% of the American population thinking he's great. And he was at the height of his popularity and the height of his power at the end of 1953. Well, he finally went too far in January of 1954. He went too far. And he began to attack Robert Stevens, who was the Secretary of the Army at the time. He started attacking Robert Stevens, who was the Secretary of the Army at the time. Well, after the George C. Marshall accusation, and now his attack on Secretary of the Army Robert Stevens, the United States Army wasn't going to stand for any more of this guy's nonsense, so they counterattacked. They counterattacked. Most people kind of ignored him and didn't fight back. Well, the Army had had enough. They had accused George C. Marshall, the patriot of all patriots, and now Robert Stevens, so the Army decided to counterattack. And what they did is they accused Senator McCarthy of attacking Robert Stevens to force the Army to give him preferential treatment. So they counterattack and say, hey, the reason you're attacking Secretary of the Army Robert Stevens is you want us to give you preferential treatment. Well, you got to know Joseph McCarthy. He had a quick temper, and he got mad, and he demanded a public hearing to clear himself of their accusations. Okay? So he got hot-headed, and I think the Army knew he would. And this charge by the United States Army that he was basically blackmailing them for preferential treatment by attacking Secretary of the Army Robert Stevens angered him, and he demanded a public hearing. Well, the Army was very happy to give him one. And these hearings between McCarthy and the United States Army would go down in American history as the Army-McCarthy hearings. The Army-McCarthy hearings. And these hearings were on national television for 35 days. They were on national television for 35 days. And they estimated that probably 20 million people tuned in to these hearings during that 35 days. 20 million people were watching this. Well, to make a long story short, by the time these 35 days were over, McCarthy had completely destroyed himself. He had continual sarcasm that upset and angered Americans. He kept interrupting in the middle of people's testimonies. He kept throwing out unsupported accusations. And by the time these hearings were over, American people viewed him more as a villain than a hero. And the Army knew if they got him out in the public on national television, he'd probably make a fool out of himself, and he did. He was continually sarcastic. He interrupted endlessly. He kept throwing out unsupported accusations. And finally, people were just tired of it. And on December 2nd of 1954, on December 2nd, 1954, the United States Senate voted 67 to 22 to censure Senator McCarthy, to censure him. So on December 2nd, 1954, the United States Senate voted 67 to 22 to censure Senator McCarthy. What does that mean, basically? You know what censure means? It means to reprimand. Okay, so if Ivan is talking when I'm talking, he upsets me and I chew his rear, I reprimand him. I kind of embarrass him, okay? Well, you don't get censured by the Senate and have much of a Senate career. You know, it takes a lot to get censured or reprimanded as a member of the Senate. So he was condemned by the Senate for conduct unbecoming a member, and 3 years later, he died of alcoholism at the age of 48. So after the Army-McCarthy hearings, on December 2nd, 1954, the United States Senate voted 67 to 22 to censure or reprimand McCarthy. His career as a United States Senator is over. He's condemned by the Senate for conduct unbecoming a member. He turns to alcohol, dies 3 years later of alcoholism at the age of 48. Now, tomorrow we're going to delve into something kind of interesting, and it will be the Eisenhower presidency, and this is where we'll begin civil rights in America that will take us all the way through the 60s. So, the Eisenhower presidency and civil rights tomorrow.